Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to cut through the noise and get to the heart of the latest research. And today, wow, we're diving into something really big, a transformative idea, actually. It's the concept that everything from the smallest particle to galaxies, even human society, it's all in constant motion. Our mission for this deep dive: to pull out the key insights from a really fascinating AI-driven study. It gives us this revolutionary way to look at the universal dynamics of movement in human society. Yeah, the sources we looked at, they pretty much flip our old ideas about reality completely on their head. Forget static things, fixed laws. We're talking about a universe that's just always moving. And understanding the science of movement, well, it's not just interesting, is it? It feels like a genuine shortcut to being really well informed about, our past, present, and future.
Absolutely. And that's where the real aha moments kick in for you, the listener. Because AI, with its incredible power to analyze these huge dynamic data sets, it gives us a totally new lens, a way to see how these continuous processes really underpin, well, everything. We're going to uncover some maybe surprising pathways to human flourishing and, just as importantly, highlight the very real dangers of stagnation at every level.
So yeah, get ready to maybe shift your perspective a bit. We're going to unpack why this continuous movement isn't just like a description of reality. It seems to be an absolute imperative for existence itself, for your own well-being, and, well, for a society that actually thrives. Okay, let's get into it. So when we talk about the science of movement, it's more than just things changing position, right? What's the deeper philosophy here? The thing that really shifts how we see reality.
Exactly. It's a really profound philosophy. It basically says everything, absolutely everything, is in continuous flux. Think about, say, a waterfall. It looks solid, right?
Yeah.
A sheet of water. But it's actually billions of individual drops, constantly moving, crashing, reforming, or even a flame. It has a shape, but it's pure process. Continuous chemical reaction, energy. And that's what we mean by metastable patterns.
Yeah.
Things like a big sturdy tree or a whole galaxy, they look fixed, but they're really these incredibly fast, constant flows of energy and information, always moving. Their apparent solidity. It's just, a function of the speed and closeness of those underlying flows.
That's a powerful image. So if existence itself is dynamic, how does that change science, how we study things, especially with something like AI?
Well, what's really groundbreaking here is that this whole perspective, it kind of blends ancient wisdom with modern science, right? And it forces us to rethink how we even do science. If everything's dynamic, then AI models can't just catalog static things anymore. They have to prioritize understanding relationships, transformations. The key insight, really, is that knowledge itself isn't fixed. It's always evolving. There's this concept, dynamic epistemic logic, that explores this. AI needs to grasp that understanding is a process, not just a final answer.
Okay, so that's the fundamental level. But what about when we zoom way out to the cosmos? Because celestial mechanics, planets orbiting stars, that seems pretty precise, almost rigid, doesn't it?
It does seem that way.
Yeah.
And it is incredibly precise, governed by these predictable laws from Kepler, Newton, EFMA, action-reaction. We can calculate orbits really well. But here's the fascinating nuance. Even these huge cosmic systems aren't entirely static. They experience what are called perturbations.
Perturbations, like little wobbles.
Exactly. Small deviations caused by the gravity of other planets, or even things like atmospheric drag on a satellite or solar radiation pressure. And these tiny effects, over long periods, they add up. They lead to changes like orbital precession, the slow wobble of an orbit itself.
So not perfectly fixed loops, after all.
Not perfectly, no. And it gets much more complex with what's called the M-body problem. That's when you have 3 or more celestial bodies all pulling on each other gravitationally. Imagine a sort of cosmic game of billiards, but with hundreds of balls all affecting each other all the time. The profound insight here, though, is that even with all that complexity, all that constant movement, there are still underlying mathematical and physical laws creating incredible order. And this really highlights AI's potential. It can use these laws to build super accurate models, even while embracing the dynamism.
Okay, cosmic scale, check. But what about zooming all the way down to the quantum level? Is the science of movement still the rule there? Or does reality get more, I don't know, stable quantum indeterminacy? Sounds kind of fuzzy.
Now you're getting to the really mind-bending part. At the most fundamental levels, modern physics gives us an even more radical picture. The universe isn't really made of tiny little things. It's made of indeterminate fluctuations. There's this perspective that argues incredibly fast-moving processes, not substances, create space-time itself, right at the smallest scales. The big insight: it's a fundamentally new physical worldview, Everything, literally everything, no exceptions, is in flux.
Wow. Okay. And what does that do to AI? How can it understand something that's fundamentally indeterminate?
Well, that's the huge challenge, isn't it? If reality at its core isn't based on stable things, then traditional AI models built on, static data points, they face a massive epistemological problem. AI needs to develop much more sophisticated tools, probabilistic models, nonlinear approaches, maybe even quantum-inspired computing, things that can actually grasp this science of movement at its deepest level. It's a huge opportunity, though, for AI to go beyond just correlating data to actually representing reality's inherent dynamism much more accurately.
To really drive home this point about stagnation being bad, let's imagine something dramatic. What if the Earth just stopped spinning?
Oh, that would be catastrophic. Instantly.
That subtle spin, the Coriolis effect, it guides storms, ocean currents. If that vanished, you'd get extreme weather, the day-night cycle totally disrupted, and the centrifugal force, the outward push that slightly counteracts...
Which would lead to massive geological shifts,
Yeah.
unimaginable earthquakes. And the oceans, they literally flow towards the poles. You'd end up with this huge megacontinent around the equator and two gigantic polar oceans.
It's a terrifying thought experiment.
It really is. But it vividly shows that stagnation, stopping movement at a fundamental level, leads to total systemic collapse. It's not just describing something. It highlights that continuous dynamic processes are absolutely essential for our planet to even exist as we know it. The analogy is powerful. Lack of movement isn't just bad, it's an existential threat. And it links directly to that idea in human development, generativity versus stagnation. Standing still really does risk falling apart.
So we've seen this pattern now, haven't we? Movement across this huge spectrum of scales. From subatomic flickers all the way to cosmic events, it really shows how continuous movement is this universal principle kind of linking everything together, connecting different fields of science. Okay, so if the cosmos is this dance of flux, what about life itself? Biologically, movement isn't just descriptive, right? It's the engine, starting right down at the cellular level.
Absolutely. Every single observable characteristic of an organism, how it looks, how it works inside, it all comes down to dynamic events happening in its cells. It's why evolution itself is fundamentally a process of movement, descent with modification. It's driven by these dynamic mechanisms, and natural selection constantly adapting species, mutation introducing new variations, then you have genetic drift, migration causing gene flow. The core insight is that life is always adapting. It's a profound example of movement at every biological level, driven by this need to survive and thrive through change.
And for us humans, our physical movement is incredibly complex. Skeleton, muscles, nerves, all working together. But it's more than just getting around, isn't it?
Oh, much more. It's obviously fundamental for survival, finding food, avoiding danger, social interactions. But the real breakthrough idea here is embodied cognition. Research is showing our body movements aren't just outputs from our brain. They're integral to how we perceive the world. Like how heavy you think an object is. That's directly tied to the dynamics of lifting it, your muscle activity. The insight is amazing. Movement isn't just what we do. It's fundamental to how we think and perceive reality. It suggests intelligence isn't static either, but deeply tied to how we physically, dynamically engage with the world.
That's fascinating. So if physical movement shapes our thinking, how does the science of movement apply to something more abstract, like our psychosocial development? Thinking about Erik Erikson's stages, like generativity versus stagnation.
Erikson's idea maps perfectly onto this. That critical stage, usually midlife, 40s to 60s, generativity is that drive to make a positive impact, right? To create a legacy. Caring for others, trying to reach your potential, contributing to society, parenting, mentoring, volunteering, civic stuff. The insight here is that this represents forward, productive movement in human terms. And people who navigate this well, they tend to report better health, better relationships, more productivity.
And the opposite is stagnation, which sounds, like our Earth stopping its rotation, but on a personal level.
Exactly that. Stagnation is being stuck, unproductive, lacking purpose. It maps that idea of stasis leads to bad outcomes right onto individual human experience. People feeling stagnant often become self-centered, uninvolved, uninterested in improving themselves. And the consequences can be quite serious. Reduced cognitive function, poorer physical health, lower quality relationships, feelings of emptiness, regret. And if it becomes widespread in a society, it really impacts collective productivity, social cohesion, overall societal health.
Which raises a really interesting question for AI, doesn't it? Could AI help spot early warning signs of societal stagnation by tracking things like, say, volunteering rates or mental health trends to help promote generativity on a larger scale?
Let's shift focus again from the individual to the collective. Human culture. We often think of culture as these fixed traditions, but the science of movement view suggests it's anything but static. Absolutely not static. Culture is a dynamic, complex, adaptive system. Sociocultural dynamics, that's the term for these evolving interactions between social structures, norms, and they're constantly being influenced by big forces like globalization, technology, migration. Cultural evolution as a field of study looks at how cultural traits, language, tech, change over time. And it's dynamic, continuous, not some straight line. Lots of factors involved. The key takeaway, globalization, for example, it can lead to cultural homogenization where things blend together, or it can lead to hybridization, new cultural forms emerging from merging different traditions. Culture is always in motion.
And it seems like culture forming is deeply connected to basic human needs. We adapt culturally, not just genetically.
Yes, exactly. Our psychology evolved to support large, cooperative groups. And cumulative cultural evolution lets us develop really refined adaptations to our environments. Quickly, new tech, knowledge, social rules for survival, trade, resolving conflict. Natural selection even seems to have favored pro-social traits like empathy, cooperation. So the core insight is cultural movement is driven by this fundamental need to meet evolving human needs, which means AI, when it analyzes cultures, needs to look beyond just surface behaviors, right? It needs to understand those underlying drivers, those needs.
So our minds are constantly shaping culture, but our minds aren't always perfectly rational. How do our cognitive processes or biases play into how culture persists and changes?
This is where it gets really crucial. Our minds aren't passive recorders, like a video camera. Memory, for instance, it's reconstructive. It's influenced by what we already know, what we expect, our emotions. It can lead to distortions. And then you have cognitive biases, these systematic errors in thinking. Like confirmation bias, we look for info that confirms what we already think. Or the availability heuristic, we overestimate the importance of info that comes easily to mind. These biases, plus our emotions, they heavily influence which cultural ideas stick around and get passed on. A really profound insight here. Cultural knowledge isn't always rational or perfectly transmitted. Cultural evolution is driven by basic cognitive stuff like imitation, innovation, social learning. And this also reveals a critical vulnerability, right? How easily societies can be influenced or manipulated if someone understands these mechanisms. That makes me think about rules and laws. If everything's moving, how do rules fit in? Are they just static things holding back the flow? Or do they have a dynamic role? That's a great question. And the science of movement perspective suggests rules aren't just static obstacles. They actually emerge as essential adaptive frameworks. They're there to manage and channel all that societal movement, hopefully toward order and cooperation. If you look at how law evolved, theorists argue it shifted from just punishment towards being tools for cooperation. Law reflects a society's values, its ideas of justice, so it's also subject to cultural evolution. The key insight. Rules that don't keep pace with changing needs, they become unnecessary or outdated. They cause friction, stagnation. They have to adapt, or the society itself suffers.
But if rules are meant to guide movement positively, why do people break them? And why do we sometimes see this awful impulse to, wipe out other cultures that seems totally counter to adaptation?
Rule breaking is complex. Psychologically, sure, personality traits, maybe early experiences play a role. Sociologically, cultural norms matter, attitudes to authority, feelings of injustice. Generally, we follow rules because of evolutionary pressures for cooperation, wanting to see ourselves positively, fear of getting caught. Now, that darker side, wanting to eliminate other cultures, that often comes from ethnocentrism, thinking your group is superior, and xenophobia, fear of outsiders. Maybe it had some evolutionary function way back in small groups, but it's incredibly dysfunctional now. The critical insight is that these destructive impulses represent a fundamental resistance to natural cultural dynamism and diversity. It's trying to stop the flow.
And history is just full of tragic examples of that resistance, isn't it?
Sadly, yes. The darkest chapters, genocides trying to erase whole populations, forced segregation, forced assimilation, trying to stamp out different identities. They're all grim reminders of what happens when societies resist that natural cultural dynamism when they try to freeze diversity. They show the immense suffering that comes from societal stagnation and refusing to adapt. And this is another place AI could potentially help. By analyzing the drivers of these things, maybe identifying patterns, it could suggest interventions to foster adaptation, empathy, pluralism, help us avoid repeating those horrors.
Okay, so let's talk about AI itself. How does AI, the sort of super observer, actually analyze and understand the science of movement? What makes it so suited for this?
Well, AI's strength lies in processing and modeling really complex dynamic systems, everything from basic perception right up to action and cognition. This makes AI a kind of meta-observer. It can potentially spot patterns of movement across different scales that we humans might totally miss. The key insight is that this deep understanding of dynamic systems is crucial for AI to do things like predict planetary changes or model subtle human behaviors. It sees the hidden currents.
You mentioned dynamic epistemic logic, DEL, earlier. How does that specific tool help AI understand the movement of knowledge itself?
All right, DEL. It's a formal logic framework specifically designed to model how knowledge and information change in systems with multiple agents, like groups of people. It analyzes what becomes true after certain model-transforming actions, like someone learning a new fact or maybe receiving misinformation. Think of it like this. DEL lets AI sort of read the room when it comes to knowledge. Imagine new info enters a group. DEL can track how that ripples through, changing what people believe, how their collective understanding shifts. It gives AI a formal way to model information spread, including disinformation and its impact. It's like mapping the intellectual currents in real time, showing how consensus or confusion flows.
That seems incredibly powerful. So with that kind of capability, AI must have huge potential for predicting societal change, maybe even helping with conflict resolution. How can it help build a better future?
The potential is definitely there. AI systems could significantly boost conflict prevention with early warning systems, analyzing satellite data, social media trends, historical patterns. Machine learning could help forecast escalations, allowing for intervention before things get worse. AI could also optimize peacekeeping, better surveillance, logistics, maybe aiding decision-making, and even help diplomats through natural language processing tools during mediation. The promise is, clearer foresight and more effective dynamic responses.
But there's always a but, isn't there? With great power, what are the challenges? The critical duality of AI's role here.
Exactly. The limitations are real and significant. Data quality is a huge one. Biased data, incomplete data, lack of access can lead to flawed AI models. And then there's the inherent unpredictability of human behavior. AI can spot risk factors, sure, but it can't fully predict the rational or irrational decisions of leaders or populations. The critical insight here, AI is an incredibly powerful tool, yes, but its effectiveness, and crucially its ethical alignment, depends entirely on human design, human oversight, and the integrity of the data we feed it. Ethical guardrails, human-centered design, they aren't just nice to have, they're absolutely essential.
Which leads us right to the darker side. Manipulating public opinion, using scientific narratives, using AI-driven disinformation. How does this exploit our own thinking to try and essentially stop critical thought?
Disinformation plays directly on our cognitive biases. Confirmation bias is huge. Social media filter bubbles and echo chambers make it worse. We just see stuff that confirms what we already think. High emotion, especially fear, makes critical thinking much harder. We become more susceptible to false stories. And there's the illusion of truth effect. Just hearing a lie repeated makes it feel more familiar, more credible, even if it's nonsense.
And AI has just turbocharged all of this.
Completely. AI-driven deepfakes, they create incredibly realistic fabricated videos, audio, making it super hard to know what's real. Information laundering uses AI to push false narratives through sources that look trustworthy. And state actors, others too, use AI-generated content, armies of bots, fake personas to manipulate perception, push agendas. The dangerous insight. This distorts the free flow of real information. It actively stagnates critical thinking. It misdirects where society puts its attention and energy. Understanding these negative uses is absolutely vital if we're going to build up our cognitive immunity and figure out effective counter strategies.
So AI interacting with the science of movement, it's this profound duality, huge potential benefits across the board, physical, biological, cognitive, social, but also really significant risks. Analyzing this is critical if we want to steer AI's influence towards good outcomes, right? We need those guardrails. So what does this all mean for us, for actually designing a better future, guiding societal movement in a good way? Let's start right at the beginning. Best possible scenario for kids. Healthy development. How do we nurture that dynamic adaptability right from infancy?
Okay, the foundation is definitely that nurturing family environment. Secure attachment, warmth, clear structure, positive discipline, responding to a child's cues, reading, singing, playing those back and forth games. Kids also need to learn to manage their feelings, cope with stress. That's crucial. And lots of play. Physical activity, plus intellectual stimulation, different books, materials, encouraging their natural curiosity, their intrinsic motivation. Then add positive self-esteem, supportive friends, safe neighborhoods, exposure to different environments. And finally, of course, the tangible stuff, basic needs met, food, healthcare. That's the bedrock, the key insight. All of this, it's about fostering a child's inherent dynamism, preparing them to navigate and thrive in a world that's always changing.
Okay, and scaling up from the child. What about a whole society, a prosperous, peaceful culture? You mentioned positive peace before.
Right. Positive peace. It's not just the absence of war. It's actively building the conditions for peace to flourish, addressing the root causes of conflict. The key pillars include a well-functioning government, transparent, accountable, equitable distribution of resources, making sure the flows benefit everyone dynamically, accepting the rights of others, good relations with neighbors. Also, a free flow of factual information, absolutely vital now with AI misinformation, high levels of human capital education, digital literacy, and low levels of corruption. The insight. Societies that actively cultivate these pillars, they're more resilient, they have higher well-being, stronger social cohesion, because they're actively embracing and guiding their own movement, internally and externally.
Which brings us to leadership and how we govern ourselves. In this dynamic world, choosing leaders seems incredibly important for well-being. How should we think about that?
Yeah, effective governance models need to move beyond rigid hierarchies. They should emphasize things like shared leadership, autonomy, empowerment, broad participation.
Yeah.
Think more like dynamic integrated circular representations. Cooperative models that prioritize democratic decision-making. And diversity is key. Diverse backgrounds, diverse ways of thinking. That's vital for navigating complexity. The Cortex board governance model is one example exploring this. The profound insight here. The proper human culture to elect a leader would value adaptability, inclusion, transparency, and a deep commitment to that positive peace. Leaders who aren't afraid of change, but know how to guide it wisely.
So if that's the leadership we need, what about our rules again? People always ask about old rules, new rules, unnecessary rules, rules that need fixing, removing, adding.
The science of movement perspective makes it clear. Rules cannot be static. They absolutely must evolve. Outdated rules, unnecessary rules, they cause stagnation. They foster conflict. They hold society back from adapting. We see that throughout history in intergroup conflicts. The key insight. Aligning human rules with, let's call them, nature's laws means understanding movement, interconnection, adaptation. It means fostering sustainable practices, responsible farming, recycling. It demands we constantly evaluate our rules, revise them, ground them in ethics. We need flexible, responsive rulemaking. Rules as intelligent channels for dynamic flows, not rigid dams.
So wrapping this all together, what's the ultimate purpose of really embracing this science of movement? What's the big goal for humanity's future here?
It's about consciously steering our own societal evolution towards beneficial outcomes and making sure the benefits are distributed equitably, the beneficiaries, societies that embrace dynamic adaptation, that promote generativity, cultivate positive peace, prioritize ethical AI, invest in their people, in cognitive immunity.
And the flip side, who gets left behind or becomes a victim in this dynamic world?
The victims are likely societies that fall into stagnation, that engage in cultural destruction, that get manipulated by disinformation, or that simply fail to ethically manage the movement of new technologies like AI. The moral imperative seems clear. Maximize the positive flows, innovation, cooperation, health, informed discussion, while actively minimizing the destructive stasis or clashes, stagnation, conflict, manipulation.
It's a lot to take in. To help visualize it, you mentioned an AI-driven schematic, kind of expanding on Bronfenbrenner's ecological systems idea. How would that look?
Yeah, imagine layers. At the very bottom, the quantum physical foundations, those indeterminate fluctuations. Above that, cosmic and planetary systems, celestial mechanics, climate dynamics. Then biological systems, evolution, physiology. Then human societal and cultural systems, cultural evolution, social norms. And at the top, individual human development, generativity, cognition.
And the AI layer is crucial here, interacting across all of them as a tool, but also an influence.
Exactly. The AI layer would be shown interacting with all these systems. And connecting all the layers would be interconnections and flow arrows, showing cause and effect, feedback loops. It would visually represent these flows of energy, these folds of flows, integrating all the concepts we've talked about, stagnation versus generativity, ethics, manipulation, adaptation. It would be a powerful way to see how movement at one level really does ripple through and affect everything else, and how AI helps us perceive those hidden dynamics.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? The big takeaway from this science of movement, it really seems to be that flux-changed movement that's the fundamental nature of reality, from the quantum foam to the cosmos, from biology to society. And AI gives us this unprecedented lens to see it, showing us both incredible paths forward and the real dangers of getting stuck.
Right. And to navigate this future of flux, to steer towards that healthy, educated, prosperous future, we came away with a few key recommendations for you to think about. First, embrace dynamic thinking in education. We need curricula that emphasize adaptability, critical thinking, understanding systems, not just rote facts. Second, promote generativity at all societal levels. We need policies that encourage contribution, innovation, civic engagement, actively fighting stagnation.
And what about how we govern ourselves and AI itself?
Third, cultivate adaptive and transparent governance. Our leaders, our systems need to be flexible, inclusive, responsive, prioritizing positive peace, not just rigid control. Fourth, and this is critical, mandate ethical AI development and deployment. Non-negotiable ethical rules, human-centered design, transparency, accountability, strong human oversight. Essential. And alongside that, build up our own cognitive immunity as individuals and societies against AI-driven manipulation.
That feels incredibly important right now. Anything else?
Fifth, foster intercultural harmony and pluralism. We need to promote understanding, adapt to diversity, actively push back against ethnocentrism and xenophobia. And finally, sixth, champion stewardship of planetary movement. We need a global commitment to sustainability, responsible resource use, and using AI wisely for things like environmental monitoring. It's about our shared home.
The insights from this deep dive really hit home, don't they? Our destiny as humans seems completely tied to our ability to understand, adapt to, and ethically guide this inherent dynamism of existence.
Absolutely. And AI is an incredibly powerful tool in this.
Yeah.
But not to replace us, not to replace human judgment. It's there to enable us to act more wisely. Human wisdom, ethical foresight, that commitment to collective well-being that has to be the ultimate compass guiding how we use AI.
By integrating AI's analytical power with our human values, societies really can consciously navigate this future of flux, aiming for that healthy, educated, prosperous future for everyone. So what stands out to you from this deep dive into the science of movement? What's one aspect, maybe in your own life or your community, that could benefit from embracing a bit more dynamic flow and actively avoiding stagnation? Something to think about until our next deep dive.
This is DigitView.